Hello everyone. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about composition. So in a broad sense, what composition basically is the placement of objects in your drawing, painting, or whatever art piece you're trying to make. In this video, I'm going to talk about composition in like the broadest sense because composition is kind of like a intuitive kind of skill that you kind of have to dig out because as we grow, we kind of have been seeing lots of pictures, movies, TV shows, just looking at like nature and stuff. You're already taking in information that can be useful to make interesting compositions. So you might notice that in the background, I'm just drawing a lot of different characters and I'm using a digital format for this one. Mainly because I want to basically use the elements that I draw in the big background video and I'm going to use them to basically create different stories, basically simplifying them and copying and pasting them in different areas to show how you can evoke a message or a feeling when you're planning your drawings. Composition should always be a part of the planning phase, and the most basic skill of composition is placing your figures where you need to put them just to make them tell the story you want to tell. So in this video, I want to make 3 pictures. One is going to be 2 characters interacting. The second one is going to be just a landscape scene with some props and some environment things. And the third one is going to be a character in like a room or somewhere where they might not be interacting, but there's going to be a few objects that we are going to use to kind of tell different stories using composition. So because composition is something that we're using for planning, in most cases, the best way to figure out how you want your picture to be when you draw is to literally draw out small squares, whatever size you want, and just drawing the same scene in different angles and different shapes and the way characters are moving or they're posing. They all have to be a little like just having a few differences for your scene. Like so in my example here, I just have 2 characters standing like that, but what if we go, they're standing facing each other and we see them like this? It looks more like a face-off type situation. So usually what I would do is actually just draw the scene at a few angles, few different ways, maybe add a few more elements to it. But in this case, because I want to kind of speed up the process a little, I drew all the elements that I need for my planned drawings and kind of made them into their simplified shapes. The reason why I simplified them is so I don't get too far into the details, because that's not what I want to focus on, right? I just want to focus on where things are going to be in their pictures and make sure that just that simple version is telling the story that I want it to tell. So for the first scene, I'm just going to have 2 characters kind of interacting. I think they might be fighting, or they don't really have to be fighting. I want to first create a good frame where I can place everything. So this is going to be my frame. So in this case, it's going to be a vertical frame. So frames can be very different, and there's like a million ways you can draw frames, how long you want them, whether they're horizontal or vertical. In animation, I know that they have frames that kind of have different shapes like this, because they're basically following the way the camera is going to pan in a scene. So the framing of an artwork usually doesn't matter. It only matters in like professional senses where you kind of have to follow a specific aspect ratio for movies and things like that. But for your own artwork, you should never really worry about like how the shape or the size of the frame. You can always have fun with that. So for now, I'm just going to draw 2 characters in this vertical frame that I have here. Now that the frame's on top and we have our tree in there, so we know that it's going to look kind of like this. So I'm going to add my first character, which is the big buff looking person. They're going to stand right there. But yeah, I'm going to zoom in a bit like that. And I'm also just going to darken it. So one thing about composition is you have to find a way to make sure your picture doesn't look confusing. So if I were to add this 3rd character in here, or the 2nd character, one thing is I can't put them right next to the tree, because if I start to blur my eyes a bit or I change the color of them, even though it's brighter, the silhouette of the character looks too much like it's a part of the tree. Even though you can see a small hand here, you can see their feet, it's still too close to the tree itself. So what I want to do now is find another way to place my objects to make the characters look more interesting and look more clear to what the story I'm telling. So I'm going to change his size to be around here, or maybe I'll make him taller. I'm just going to make it skinnier. So now they're taking up a lot of the scene. And I'm going to add this character. I'm going to try moving them and making them smaller. I would say this is better compositionally, because you can see that this character is facing off or like meeting up with this character right here, or it looks like they're sneaking up towards them. But the thing is, we're focusing on this character, which is great, but we don't really get to see what this character is doing because they're too small. So now we want to find another way to balance that. So let's say instead, I'm going to keep this character kind of more in the center, just to keep him, and I'm going to change the scale a little there, just so we can see that it's a person and they're standing there. I'm going to make this tree a bit taller and more out of the way. I want to indicate that there's a tree and they're in their environment, but I don't want it to distract from what you're viewing. Yeah. And then what I'm going to do is I'm now going to move this character and try to make them bigger, right? So they're not like, so they don't look lost in the scene. They're bigger so you can see them a bit more. Even though they are interacting with the tree, it's not as like merged with the tree. You can see a clear silhouette for the character. You can see a clear silhouette for the tree. Just going to move the big guy up because he's in the foreground. There we go. You can see a clear silhouette for the tree. You can see a clear silhouette for the character. I am liking how the way it's going right now. I want to try to make it a little better. So I feel like this character is great, but he is distracting too much. So I'm going to scale him down. And now this character holding the sword is lost, and I want to make sure that's there because I know that was a, like, that indicates something's about to happen, or like they're about to fight and stuff. So I want to move this tree out of the way a little. I think this is a good way of indicating what I want. So we have our environment element telling you where they are, kind of in a forest. We have our first character in the foreground showing that it's a muscular person, and it looks like they're either staring down or walking away from that second character. And the other part is that the second character is there and they have a weapon drawn or some object ready to fight, basically. So that is a few ways of me just playing around and finding a good way to represent like this scene with two characters interacting. The next one I want to be doing for this video is just an environment. So just so I could see one real quick, I'm just going to remove all my my silhouettes and just leave my sketches in. Well, he's facing the other way, so I'm just going to erase. I want it to face the back, so I'm just going to quickly draw that into. Erase all that. Now this is in front of the scene. Pencil draw. So I'm going to put my arm, fist, some muscle. There we go. And if I were to, yeah, that's interesting. I might change this head because I know I worked it a lot. There we go. Yeah, so that's my first scene. Just playing around with the basic shapes, getting an interesting image from just that big shapes. I'm not worrying about all these small details. You can see that I did worry about it when I was drawing just the character. But for composition, I'm just focusing on that big shape and not worrying about any of the small details. That's why simplifying your objects when you're drawing them is always a great idea. So the next scene is going to be an environment. So just a quick landscape image. And I'm just going to show you how balance kind of works when you do a composition. So the elements I have for this one are a few mountain shapes. So this one, and I think this one, and this right here. First, I want to make like a balanced scene, right? So we have 3 objects, and I want the focus just to be on the whole scene itself. I don't want it to be on one main thing or make anything look bigger than it should be and things like that. So for the first one, I'm just going to basically get this mountain right here, scale that up. Oh, let me uniformly scale it. Oh. Scale it up and turn it a bit, fix that. I think I want it to be the whole, basically just take up the whole, there. I'm also quickly just gonna add a white line to make it like an ocean scene, because that one of the elements is a boat. There we go. And then the second element I want to add is my boat. So that's that. And then the boat is going to be here. I'm going to change the color quickly to just be lighter than the mountain at least, and move that. Oh, and then move this whole group right here. I'm going to make it a bit smaller just to make it look to scale, basically. Then the next one is the second rock face or mountain range that I have. I'm going to darken it first off. So here's saturation. Let's darken it. Oh, not too much. There. And flip it horizontal. So make it smaller. I want to make it more smaller. So I would say this is a balanced scene. Everything is kind of to scale of like what we would recognize it as. So now another way to indicate this scene is to, let's say we want to have a shore and this boat is coming towards the shore. So I want the main focus to be this boat now, right? So I'm going to take this, I'm going to put that at the foreground, and I'm going to scale it up, and I'm just going to turn it a bit. Boom. That's one. And now I'm going to take my background here. I think I want to keep this for now. And I want to lower it so it doesn't take up as much space of the boat. I'm going to scale it down. Lower it. I want it to at least fill like the horizontal of the scene. Okay, perfect. And then to make the boat the focus of the scene, I'm making this much bigger. Maybe even like out of the frame. And then if I looked at it just as the scene itself. So just these three simple elements, I was able to make two different drawings. Now we could see that this boat is going towards a shore. Just from the shapes. I'm not even, I don't even have any drawing or anything like that. It's just the shape. Now let's do it again, but let's make the shore the more important part. So I'm going to take that, not the background, or the background I'll just make it much smaller. Much smaller, there we go. And then I'm going to get that, not the boat yet, the rock, because I want this to be in the foreground. I'm going to flip it, not vertically, horizontally to get my shape. And just make it huge. I don't want it to cut out and go above the frame, but I do want to indicate that like this is like a big rock face type thing. And now my boat, I want it to be like the second element that you would focus on. So I'm just going to take that, scale it down. I'm going to, not vertically, horizontally move it, shift it. Let's move the island lower. And then I'm going to do freeform and just stretch it out a bit. I feel like the mountains in the background are still too distracting, so I want to lower it even more. To a point where maybe it guides the eye towards the boat. So this angle here, I'm trying to use it to point towards the boat. There you go. And then I'm just going to white out the area that I don't want to be seen. Oh, that's pretty good. So now when we zoom into that scene, the scene has changed drastically. And we're seeing that whatever this boat is, it is going to the shore, but we're more focused on like this rocky cliff. So I'm just going to clear up the shapes and just have the drawings. So it's a bit more clear. And there we go. That's our second scene, which is just like an environment and using, again, the basic shape. That's all you need. If you can just use your basic shapes and you have like an idea of what you want, you can start playing around with those shapes to make whatever scenes you're interested in making. Usually I would just draw out each version just by like kind of sketching them out. But in this case, making them the simplified shapes and breaking them down, it really forces you to worry about just the composition and not worry about anything that's unimportant in this part of the drawing, which is the details of the boat or the details of this mountain and things like that. All right, so the next one I wanted to do was a character in a room. The reason why I wanted to do that is because it's a simple thing to draw, because it's just a character in the room, but there's so many ways you could just draw that one thing. So one thing you can always do is have a frame within a frame. So I want to just show that using props. So we have our props ready for the scene. I want the table in the foreground for this one because I want to show you guys how you could use objects in the scene to create a frame for your characters to be indicated like within. So I want this to be the foreground. So I'm gonna make it bigger, much bigger. So now it looks like an object in the foreground, and I'm gonna darken it. Use saturation brightness, because it is in the foreground. And then I'm gonna have my lamp object. Not that one, this one. I'm gonna scale this up. Oh, I think I have to duplicate this one too. There. Scale this up to a point like here. And I'm gonna, I think I have both of them open here. Okay. And then I'm going to add my back wall. So for this one, I'm just gonna quickly change the shading a bit. So I want to add that door frame that I have. Where is it? There it is. So this is just gonna be a door frame. And I wanna make it smaller. So we know that this is where the floor is basically. So I'm gonna quickly paint out the value I used for the door frame and add a background. So I want them to be the main focus, so I'm going to move them right here, scale them down. And I'm going to move them a bit more, not right around here. Maybe I could widen that that back there, but for now this is what I want to do. There we go. Yeah. I'm going to also darken up this just to make it match the foreground. So this is one scene where I'm basically using the different shapes that I made for the scene to frame the character. So if I change my pencil to red and just, so this is basically framing the character by putting a frame within a frame. Another part of this that's interesting is I have the object itself is pointing at what the main focal part is, right? It's not going to be this side of the picture, it's this main area, it's wherever this is leading. Also, even this is a line that's leading towards the character. Just the perspective I'm using for the foreground object itself. So that's one scene I wanted to do with the character. The second one I want to try is changing the focus to the character in the foreground. So let's try emphasizing the figure. So now the character is in the foreground. Scale them appropriately. I'm gonna add my door, scale up the door, kind of just have it there in the back. Looks like someone entered basically. And now I'm gonna move what I had in the foreground in the background for this scene. So this is another way to indicate that scene where our focus is the character. I think I could scale the character even bigger, right? Just to make sure it shows like this is the focus. This is what you should be looking at. Like even out of the frame. There. The character's in the same position that it was when it was small and being framed by the objects, but the feeling or the idea that you're showing is more different because now we're focusing on the character in a different way where they're more powerful in the scene itself. When they were small and kind of framed by the objects, there's a few ways to indicate, like there's a few ways that feelings that can evoke. Sometimes it can evoke like being trapped, sometimes it could evoke being lost. The next one I want to do is a balance scene. Just like how I had a balanced scene for the environment drawing, I want to have another balanced scene specifically for this character art. Basically, to have a balanced scene, you kind of just have to scale everything to what we would usually see in the real world when we're looking around. So everything kind of just scales correctly. So let's get these two. First, I want to get the door done, so I'm gonna make it smaller to look like where we can see like where the door is, kind of like that. I'm gonna delete this for now, and I'll add a new layer and just paint in the walls to match where I put my door. So because that's the door, I want to say they enter the room. Let's say they're a bit smaller than the door itself. This has a more balanced feel compared to the other two images just because everything is kind of to scale of like the average height. The door looks correct for the size of the walls. The character looks correct for the size of the door. And like even these objects, even though they're new looking objects or something you haven't seen before, they look like they kind of match the size of how they should be. I'd say the crystal is kind of taking away focus on the character. So what I'm going to do is just make that smaller too. So there. So that's the way you can kind of play around with just shapes and moving things around to find the best option for you to tell the story that you want. Sometimes you get it straight in your head and you draw it and it's perfect from the start. But experimenting is always a good way to find, maybe you just didn't think of it and you'll just have a better option when you're drawing, or like you'll find out that the first one you had in your mind was just great the whole time, and there's like no other way to tell the story you want. So here are 3 scenes. Just I kind of just cleaned up the edges and cleared out the silhouettes, but that's basically how you would focus on getting the right placement when you're figuring out what you want to draw or what you're drawing itself, or once you have the idea and you just want to figure out the best way to show whatever story or anything you're trying to tell. And sometimes the first thing you have in your mind will be perfect, and you'll do a few drawings, a few different compositions, and you won't find anything that works. But the more drawings you do of the same scene in different ways, you might find a better way to indicate the story that you want to tell. So next week, what we'll be doing is I'm going to be talking about the 4 main elements of composition and going deeper into it, because this one is more of a surface level, what the basics of composition is, and I was just giving you some examples. So if you want to see that next week, like if it helped you, and subscribe for next week's video. Thank you.